Oh, hi there. I'm soaking up the sun's energy, harnessing the sun's energy. Well, in today's show, Tony Ryan of Sheffield University is going to talk about Project Sunshine and how they are going to harness the sun's energy and energize the planet for 1 year. Just in 1 day of sunshine, we can energize the whole planet for 1 year. I'm going to soak this up.
Explorations. Probing global diversification. We travel the world so you don't have to. With me today is Tony Ryan, who is the coordinator of a project called Project Sunshine. Tony is the chief coordinator of all sciences everywhere. No, actually in Sheffield University, and it's a big project that they've undertaken, and we're going to talk about that today. So welcome, Tony.
Hi.
Hi. So a little bit about your background and in specifically how it deals with how you became involved in sciences.
Okay. So I was a regular kid, interested in chemistry, making my own fireworks. I built a flamethrower, kind of bangs and smells. But I was always taking things apart, So I think when I was 10, my dad bought me a tape recorder, and I was under strict instructions, do not take it apart. And anyway, when I took the back off, there was a little note inside that said, don't take the back off. I told you not to take the back off. So, and that's how I got into science.
That's pretty amazing. So you've actually had quite a run through the sciences to this point. Can you briefly tell us then how you've come to this point in your career? I mean, you've obviously worked and been in a lot of places over the years.
Sure. So I did my bachelor's degree in Manchester in polymer science and technology, and then I stayed there to do a PhD. And then after that, I went to the University of Minnesota to be a postdoc. I had a NATO research fellowship because I thought NATO were better off spending its money on me than bombs and planes and things. And then I came back to be a lecturer in material science in Manchester, and then senior lecturer and reader. And eventually I came across to Sheffield to be the professor of physical chemistry. And since then, I've been the head of the chemistry department and now the head of the faculty of science.
That's an amazing run. Now, as far as the sun is concerned, how did you get interested in the sun and its influences?
So when I took over as dean, I'd always been interested in sustainability. But when I took over as dean, I was looking for a story to tell. And when I started to look at the science in Sheffield, in the maths department, we had people who work on how the sun works. It's a big plasma reactor, it's its own dynamo. And they worked with the physicists on how you might harvest the sun's energy and turn it into electricity. In the chemistry department, I was already working with the people who do photovoltaics on controlling the structure of materials in devices. But we also had chemists working with biologists on the proteins in the photosynthetic complex. And they came from the molecular biology department. And in molecular biology, there are people who do plant physiology, and they work with the botanists. So they were already working on how to make rice more efficient, and they had to redo the plumbing in rice to take advantage of C4 photosynthesis. And in the botany department, well, it's called Animal and Plant Sciences. So in our Animal and Plant Sciences department, there's a whole group of ecologists who do whole Earth modeling of population dynamics and terrestrial carbon cycling and nitrogen cycling, and they work with the mathematicians. So all of a sudden, I'd gone all the way around the Faculty of Science, and there was the sun in the center. And that got me thinking about energy, how we deliver energy. And I talked to some historians and some archaeologists and realized that actually this period of fossil fuel generated growth is a little anomaly. And actually, we're going to come back to having to use the sun for all our energy again, just like we did 300 years ago.
Right. Now, Project Sunshine itself, how did the conception of that, and maybe you can tell me a little bit more about how it came into being specifically.
Well, it was of the moment. You know, people had already been talking about grand challenges, global grand challenges, and so it happened by basically a fortunate coincidence that we had people in Sheffield who addressed all these areas of collecting energy, making photosynthesis more efficient, designing plants, interested in farming. So I got them together in a group, and then we nucleated a group of environmental psychologists. So when I was hiring people into the faculty, I had a couple of professors who were interested in public understanding of risk and how the public understand the risks associated with food and energy security. And then that got us out to the economists and the social scientists and the geographers. And in human geography, there's a big group who happen to be working on consumer behavior related to food. So once we got out there, it became apparent to me that this was a project that the whole university could come together on. And that could be one of our research themes.
Does the public understand the risks, did you find?
Yeah, well, it's a bit like voting, every time we elect a government that says they're going to charge less tax. Okay, but people know that kind of taxes, there is some public good. So they want the National Health Service. Yeah, they want good things to happen in their communities, but they won't vote for no political party says, vote for me, I'll raise taxes, because they'll never get elected. And that kind of short-sightedness, knowing what the right thing to do is, but actually changing your life to do it, that's the thing that's missing in the public understanding of risk. Because actually, your behavior is part of the risk.
So whose job is it to let the public know the correct answers?
Well, again, I'm not sure there are correct answers.
Right.
I mean, these are things we need to talk about and weigh up the pros and cons of, and everyone needs to make their own lifestyle choices. But what's without a doubt is we need to put less carbon in the atmosphere. And there was a Canadian economist who, Kenneth Knowles, said, the only people who believe in exponential growth in a finite world are madmen and economists.
Well, certainly the economy can't be predicted. I mean, you hear so many high-priced economists talking about the economy, and it usually doesn't work out the way they predict.
Well, and the big problem we have is we always talk about growth. You've sent that we have a Canadian now running the Bank of England, and he talks about growth. And the thing about growth is, if growth means you consume more of the Earth's resources, we're not going to leave anything for our children, our grandchildren, their children. So the Earth, the planet's going to be fine. I mean, the planet doesn't need saving. It's saving the planet as a place where human beings can thrive and prosper.
Take advantage of what the sun creates here, and then taking that and adjusting it, as you said earlier. You were talking about rice, I believe,
yeah.
Where scientists were trying to adjust the rice to make it so that it reacts better to the sun, and you would do this with other things as well.
And we need to learn how to use the sun as our primary source of energy. So not only grow food more efficiently, but also make better use of the energy. Because we only have to capture 1 hour of sunlight to power the whole of the Earth's economy for a year.
Is that right?
Yeah. So digging fossilized sunlight out from under the ground is kind of dumb.
So you want to catch it on its way in.
Well, on the fly. So rather than at the moment, so the stuff we burn, if you're getting oil from tar sands, or you're fracking gas, or you're using conventional oil or coal, basically you're using photosynthesis that happened millions, or in some cases billions of years ago, and that energy has been stored in the form of carbohydrate underground. What we ought to do is do what plants do today, which is take sunlight and carbon dioxide from the air and make fuel. So they make fuel for us. Yeah. So we need to learn how to do that for ourselves, and maybe bypass conventional photosynthesis and make a liquid fuel from sunlight and carbon dioxide.
Any theories about how you might do that? I get this image in my mind of a metaphorical electrical cord attached to the sun, and the other end is attached to your car or whatever. Any ideas?
Well, so trees, plants, leaves should be black, right? If they were black, they'd absorb the full spectrum, the full solar spectrum. So the first thing we need to do is think about absorbing the solar energy. And then how can you convert that solar energy into a usable fuel? Well, the answer is you do what plants do. So you split water and make hydrogen and oxygen. I put the oxygen back into the atmosphere. And then the hydrogen you can use to convert carbon dioxide into a liquid. And the chemistry is well known. It's Fischer-Tropsch chemistry. And you can make methanol. Methanol's a liquid. Easy to store, it burns well, you can run cars from it, you can run central heating from it. And so you could make a liquid fuel directly from the sun. And it's perfectly feasible. There's a great book by George Olah called The Methanol Economy that essentially tells us how to do it. Mm-hmm. So it's feasible, but it's expensive to do compared with digging buried sunshine out from under the ground. Because when you dig buried sunshine out from under the ground, the only price you pay is the digging. You don't pay for any of the environmental damage. You don't pay for the lost amenity for future generations. You only pay for the digging.
What would you say? I mean, obviously there is some work ahead too, trying to get past people's what's the word? People's self-interests, such as governments and oil companies and things like that. How do you get past that to get them to start accepting some of the theories that you guys are putting forth?
No, and that's tough. I mean, I think the march of capital and the payment of shareholder value doesn't fit very well with how we need to deal with resources for the future. So our economic system is based on a 30-year timeline, maybe a 40-year timeline. So the current economy places no value on our grandchildren, right?
That's right.
So it really is broke. I mean, the system is broke, and it really does need fixing so that vested interest is taken out of human development. And actually, that's never happened before. But you need to think about if you had a petri dish and you were growing bacteria in a petri dish, you counted the number of bacteria, then the population would rise, and it'd continue to rise, and then the bacteria would use up all the resources, and then the population would plateau, and then eventually it'd fall. Okay? We need to kind of work out a different way to use the petri dish.
Right.
Because otherwise the human beings are going to fall. Because the planet's full. And the system the economic system that we use was one that was devised when there were 10 times less people than there are now. And it's been great at driving growth, but I don't think the current system can truly drive sustainability.
What has to happen then in order for us to get to that point?
Well, I think people need to feel a bit of pain first. There might have to be.
I don't think people like to hear that.
No, but they're not going to change their behaviour otherwise, right? I mean, you need to go to the doctor for him to tell you that your weight's doing you damage before you start eating less, right? And I think that's a metaphor that applies to the whole planet now. And there's massive inequalities in levels of consumption. So, if one way to make things more equal would be to bring all these people up to our level, okay? But if we do that, we'd need another planet's worth of resources. So there has to be some redistribution of how we use the Earth's resources, and that pain is going to be the hard one. Getting people to realise that business as usual, especially for us in the West, really can't go on.
Well, especially when certain countries use oil, for instance, as a political football. I can speak of maybe I won't. I won't say who does that, but I think we've all heard recent examples of that. Things like that. Trying to cross government and country boundaries and lines. Everyone's got their own philosophy about the way this should be done.
And again, I think the kind of the treaties that we have about reducing carbon footprint, the international treaties, they're a good step forward. But sometimes, not putting your personal interest first is hard enough, but not putting your national interest first seems to be even harder. To get out of this mess that we've got ourselves in is going to take some pretty radical thinking.
It seems to me you need some kind of coordination, though, to get all of this happening.
Yeah.
Who do you think should take the bull by the horns here?
Well, I think the responsibility to a larger extent is on the wealthier nations. So, I think the G8 does have a big role to play here. In leading by example, because if we are going to have some coordination, it has to be do as I do rather than do as I say. And we shouldn't really be asking other nations to constrain their and I was about to say economic development. We shouldn't really ask other nations to constrain the development of their populations in terms of health and well-being, education, to fund what looks like luxury at the other side of the ocean. So I think there is a big role for the responsible West to play, and the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, they also have a leading role to play in terms of giving good example by perhaps showing some restraint, but not as much restraint as we need to show.
Has there been much interest then from the international community in this project that you're working on?
Yeah, and we've talked about kind of geopolitics more than anything else thus far. But in terms of the technical details, there's been quite some interest. We have great collaborations with the International Rice Research Institute in the Philippines. One of our guys, a professor from Sheffield University, is the technical director out there. We have research collaborations across the world. For example, in using solar energy, we have a combination of a technical project and a social project at the moment. The technical project is about how solar panels are used in the community, and it deals with communities in the UK, in the West, and communities in Bangladesh, so in a more deprived nation. So we're doing all kinds of things to do with food and energy across the world.
I guess the key is to keep the dialogue going.
Yeah, and I think so. There's lots that we in the West can learn about using resources better from the developing nations. So I don't know what it's like in Canada, but in the UK we don't make very good use of human excrement as fertilizer.
Yeah, I don't think it's used at all here, or at
Right.
least not in its pure form.
So in but 100 years ago, I mean, no piece of poo went unused, right? I mean, it was all collected to go back on the fields, and what we've done is we've developed plants, especially kind of high yield wheat varieties, that are completely disconnected from the soil. And even if we gave them organic fertilizer, they wouldn't be able to use it because they've been basically bred to use Haber-Bosch inorganic fertilizer. So, learning from nations that still do have a gong farmer attitude and will use human waste, because every atom that comes in here kind of leaves from the other end.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to learn to recycle all those atoms and not throw nitrogen and phosphorus into the river and then into the sea, where we can, in terms of phosphorus, it will take us millions of years to ever get it back out of the sea.
I know in Western countries too, we've become like farming has become big business, right? There aren't a lot of solo farmers. It's all wrapped up in a huge industrial complex.
And perhaps if we end up with a population of 10 billion people, we'll need to provide a lot of food calories that way still. It's just that there are different ways that you can, you don't have to do the farming in the same way, in the same highly mechanized way. So the best organic farms can approach the yields of kind of the highly mechanized, agro industry, because there are more people taking more care and being in touch with the soil and the local environment. And part of the problem we face is there aren't enough people farming.
That's true. That the farms seem to be diminishing.
Yeah, well, I mean, the farms are growing, but the farmers are diminishing.
Right, that's what I meant. Yeah,
and we need to, if we had more kind of well-educated people who were really living food production, we'd be able to grow more food with less external input.
Yeah. So obviously, there is a lot of education that has to happen here, I think, and in some cases, there are probably a lot of people who don't ever think about this. Is there any solution at all that way to try and bring those who are not involved at all into play here?
So one of the, I mean, we try. I mean, I try all sorts of things.
Dress up girls, in bikinis and have them walk around with placards, "Save our food."
No, well, that I think that might get you an ephemeral interest.
Right.
Actually, the market's going to do a lot of this because basic commodity prices are going up and up. So people are starting to pay more attention to how much things cost in the shopping basket. And getting out there and talking to politicians, I think politicians are beginning to understand what food security means. I mean, it's different for you guys because you're a net food exporter.
Right.
But for us in the UK, who are a net food importer, not having food security, not being able to feed yourself, is actually a big deal. Because so the Russians might be turning the gas off to the Ukraine at the moment, right? But the Ukrainians, they have plenty of fields, they have plenty of sunshine, they can grow plenty of food. They're actually going to be okay. Okay. If people start turning our gas off here in the UK, we can't grow enough food, we can't buy enough, we can't import enough. It's a big deal. And so I mean, I've been out and about. I've collaborated with a social scientist. We've written Project Sunshine up as a book, and the paperback comes out in a month or so. And just get out there and shout from the rooftops.
Now, I think this is a great idea, but has there been any resistance to this project?
Um, well, so some of my academic colleagues have kind of resisted. There's a bit of a not invented here thing.
Really?
Yeah, well, and it's the same. You have intelligent people. There are some big egos around, so you're not quite telling the story how they'd like it to be told. So there's a bit of that. But every time I go out and talk to people about, because I do try and be optimistic, because I really do think we can solve these problems. The technical solutions are there. I mean, that's the great thing. We don't actually need to invent that much more in terms of technology. What we need to do is learn how to use it better like all the citizens of the world. And that message is quite a nice message to hear if you're one of those citizens. Whether it's such a nice message to hear if you think about how your pension gets paid, or if you work for a big corporation that has a vested interest in the status quo is another matter. And where we do come up against resistance, it's from those vested interests you mentioned earlier.
What kind of changes do you think that we'd have to make in order for this to work? You were talking earlier about the fact that basically it needs to be promoted so that people are more aware of it and think about this more and that kind of thing, and of course those who like yourself are in countries like Britain where you're not a food producer, you're a food importer. What kinds of changes do you think that we should be making to our planet to make this thing work?
Well, the changes that will be unpopular. So we have to pay more than the net present value for the energy we use. Okay, so energy needs to cost more. And it needs to cost more because as a world, we need to invest in the future of energy for the generations that will follow. And at the moment, we really aren't paying for it. We're not making that investment, and we're selling energy too cheap. So I think if we could make one change, if we could agree to one change, it would make energy more expensive to use. I'm talking about the electricity that comes out of the socket in the wall, or the gas that you put in your car, the fuel that heats your home. They need to be more expensive, and we need to collect that income and invest it in truly renewable sources of energy.
I noticed they do. Sorry, go ahead.
But no, that would be if we could do one really radical thing, that would be it.
I know in some of the provinces in Canada they do that. There's sort of an energy surtax, if you will, or whatever, to allow researchers to work on these problems. But then you have our conservative government who is so caught up in making money and also poo-poos some of the ideas that come from the scientific community. I've only heard this term recently, the science. Does the science add up to the economics? And often the science has more grandiose ideas than what politicians are willing to invest in.
And I think that will always be the case because politicians have to get elected next year or maybe the year after or the year after that. So they have less of an investment in the future than the big corporations.
Right.
And perhaps the way we do politics is part of the problem.
I would think so. How many people like politicians? Yeah,
well, exactly. How many? We have a closet racist standing in the UK at the moment because he says populist things about immigration, and it's terrible.
Right. Okay, just getting away from the political side of it, although that's a big aspect of it. Just going back to the project, you were saying that there is international interest. Is there international involvement directly with what you're doing, or is this more or less a Sheffield University-driven thing?
No. So really, our researchers, whether they be in biology, in physics, in engineering, in economics, in geography, they inevitably all do research at this international global level. So the kind of university we are means that we have research partners all over the world. So the food security group have very, very good links into Europe, where obviously there are great similarities in terms of food distribution networks, and funnily enough in consumption patterns. The people doing the work on cereals have research collaborations with the Philippines and the US. The people we have a great program on understanding plant pathogen interactions and pests, and that they work with people in Africa on different kinds of agriculture. So it really is worldwide.
Okay. My producer here is pointing out a couple of other questions to ask you. I missed it, David. Sorry. I guess I have a question here that was probably similar to what. Okay. In your research to this point, have you run across any surprises? Made any startling discoveries?
So actually, what can be quite interesting is, science really does work by baby steps. Okay, so it's mainly about incremental changes, and we've been working for a long time on driving up the performance of solar cells made from plastics. Then out of the blue, a group in Oxford came up with a whole new solar cell technology based on an inorganic structure called a perovskite, and they kind of blew us out of the water. So we've rapidly been playing catch up.
Can you explain that the term?
Yeah. So the perovskite, it's a mineral structure. So these are compounds based around iodine. So the metal iodide structures, and it turns out that they have unusually high optoelectronic properties. So they'll give you a more efficient solar cell, and because of the nature of the materials, they're rather easy to process. So kind of there's a new competitor in the race, which is kind of frightening, and on one sense for our researchers, but really rather nice that the competitive nature of science means that all these technologies can start competing.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think is worth mentioning?
No, so we've talked about kind of recycling, about not wasting the human resource that we currently throw away. So, about using our excrement as fertilizer. And I think that the thing that I'm keenest for people to understand is when we had the population explosion in the Green Revolution, that happened because we learned how to breed plants to make use of the fertilizer that we gave them, right? And we could grow short stalk plants with big seeds, and that's basically how the prairies work today. Before that, right, before the Dust Bowls, the cereals in the prairies really talked to the soil because there was as much going on under the ground in fungi, these things called mycorrhiza, that traded with the grasses for vital nutrients. So the grasses gave the fungi sugar, and the fungi basically took minerals from the soil to fertilize the grass. What we have to do, and what I have people working on, is rebuilding that connection between modern cereal plants and the soil.
So we've been destroying the ecosystem of the plants.
Yeah, pretty much. So, and I think that thin veneer of soil, which is like a thin varnish on the coating, the surface of the Earth. We need to be really, really careful about that, and we're only just starting to understand the importance of the quality of the soil and the carbon content of the soil, and how it cycles in the soil for our livelihood.
Do you personally get frustrated or angry about the way we're doing things, and as opposed to the way we should be doing things? Do you get caught up in that? Like, I mean, it almost seems like an endless task that will never be achieved.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do. I mean, I shout at people in big cars. So I will rail against gas guzzlers, against profligate lifestyle choices. I find that frustrating. And big business, compound interest, unsustainable economic growth. Yeah, they're kind of... My friends sometimes say, "Hey, Tony, just, why don't you just have a beer and relax?"
Well, sometimes like you're one of the spearheaders, obviously, one of the people who's pushing this forward.
And I can just have a beer and relax, but then when I'm relaxed, I need to get back on the mission.
Right. Yeah. If we could make your wishes or dreams come true, what would that be? I guess I'm talking here about people in general in the project, not David and me here.
Okay. So a dream. If Tony Ryan the scientist's saying, like Martin Luther King, I have a dream. My dream would be that we had a synthetic tree. So we had a tree with big black leaves on, and that tree dribbled methanol. So it just kind of sat there. It stored the sun's energy as a liquid fuel. It's completely carbon neutral because it's taking the carbon from the atmosphere. People would still need to use it responsibly, but we'd be taking the solar energy from the sun for free, because that's what our star's for.
Now, the one kink in the ointment there would be the fact that the tree can't move itself. Once it's stored all that energy, I mean, wouldn't you want to get it to where the energy can be used, or would you count on people coming up to the tree to tap into the energy?
Well, if every home had its own kind of free energy tree,
okay,
and you could power a home, and if you're making fuel at that level, every tree's dribbling, then kind of piping it to a central collections place would be easy to do. I mean, we managed to collect all that milk, right, from all those farms. So surely if we had a big plantation of fuel producing trees, we'd figure out a way of collecting it.
Now, generally, there are side effects to these kinds of things, though. What do you perceive any kind of side effect to your dream?
Well, I think if energy was free, right, then we'd end up being very, very wasteful again, and we'd perhaps forget that energy is not the only resource. We need to be careful that we leave precious metals, we leave iron ore, we leave things behind for future generations. So, yeah, having an excess of free energy would be really bad.
Yeah, we do tend to be a bit myopic that way, I guess. We think of ourselves and then be damned with everybody else kind of thing, right? It's unfortunate, but I don't know if we can change our attitudes. I'm not sure that that's possible. Maybe it is.
I don't think we have an option.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing, if you guys could make a dream come true for me. There's a Canadian author I read a lot of. He's a macroeconomist called Vaclav Smil, and he's at the University of Manitoba. And I've read loads of his books, and we've corresponded a couple of times, but I've never managed to meet him. He'd be a nice guy.
All right, Tony. Well, thank you so much for this chat. Very, very interesting, and it's actually changed my mind about a number of things.
Oh, wow. Good. Well, thank you.
Not that I'm any kind of scientist or anything like that, but I mean, we all have a vested interest in this.
Yeah.
So, would you like to learn more about harnessing the sun's energy? Go to our website at ZintarsCers.com. For Explorations, I'm Nina Hilger.